Hey everybody, welcome to a new tutorial based video that I'm going to be posting. This is something a little bit different. My name is Christopher Epling. I own and run EplingIllustrations, which is a company that services all sorts of different clients, from publishers to editorial cartoons for newspapers, all sorts of different things that we do here. But mainly we focus on illustration work and then also education, so going out to schools, talking to students. Also a big focus on comics, so mini comics, everything doing with scenes and small publications, small print work. That's what we're all about. We're gearing up for this fall. We're going to be producing a new line of small mini comics, as well as a few different types of portfolio books, which will be just like an art book full of different sketches and different things related to the work that we're doing. Okay, when I say we, I'm actually talking about a few different people that are associated with this. I of course draw and produce a lot of the work, all the work pretty much, except for when going out to events and doing school workshops. Mr. Bobby Sullivan, he helps me a great deal with the presentations and getting those prepared and developed, and at all events he's just a humongous help. Can't do it without him. So we really appreciate him. And also we have other folks that are involved. Jake Sexton with the podcasting. We'd like to thank Bruce Parsons for helping us with having a host site on iTunes and Stitcher and Google Play for the Monk Media podcast, which is something else we do. And then we also, on the other end, like to thank Kelly Thompson and Jeff Hawkins and Desi Bowling, who are great, just great assets to us. We love them. They're awesome. They basically open up the doorway through KVEC, the Kentucky Valley Educational Co-op, so that we're able to go to more schools and get the word out more about sequential art, creative writing, and combining those together. So thank you for tuning in. Now today's going to be a little bit different. I'm an editorial cartoonist just on a weekend basis for the Appalachian News Express, okay? And I thought it'd be cool to kind of walk you through what the preparation of an editorial cartoon looks like from my end. Today's the day when I need to prepare one, get it ready, and submit it. So today I'd love if you would walk with me through that process of creating an editorial cartoon for a newspaper. Editorial cartoons vary. They're found, of course, on the editorial page of a newspaper, but the content or whatever you're seeing and reading has nothing to do with like the funnies or comic strips. Now there's funny characters sometimes in those. A lot of times they're political, either on a national level, world level, or even a local level. And then other times they're just a comment-based little funny comic strip, such as when a deer entered the local Walmart, where in the region, one of the Walmarts in the region the Appalachian News Express covers. That was a big deal. There was a deer inside the Walmart, so we did a cartoon on that because that's funny, and it's relative to the readers, so the readers know what we're talking about. So that's the sorts of things that we do with editorial cartooning. So today you get to walk through that process with me. So I'm really happy to be able to provide this for you. Please subscribe to the channel. That helps a whole lot. Subscribing basically just gets the videos out there more, and we want other people to see this. So thank you so much for subscribing and tuning in. So let's go ahead and get started on working on an editorial cartoon for the Appalachian News Express. Okay? Alright, here we go. Okay, so starting out, looking for an idea is probably the hardest thing when it comes to editorial cartooning, especially when there's not a lot going on in the news. My first step always is to keep up to date with what is going on in the news. So I may go to, or I always go to, the Appalachian News Express website. I read what's happening in the articles. I have a subscription to the Appalachian News Express that the newspaper provided for me. So what I first do is I look at their featured stories, which is on the main page. If you scroll down, you'll see top story. That's of the feature stories. Which one is the top story? Then you get into the news. Now this is all local news, so you'll see a pattern of this. So it's all things associated with Pike County and Eastern Kentucky, which most newspapers, local newspapers, focus on. The Appalachian News Express covers a pretty wide area. The company's actually made up, I think, of two different newspapers, one for the Mingo Messenger and then the Appalachian News Express. So I read through here and I start looking at the titles of maybe some of the opinions. Waiver programs need support. Signs of new life. We get down to sports. I hardly ever cover sports just because there's usually so much going on that, that I just kind of stay away from sports. But When I look through the main stories happening, I always like to click through the featured stories list. So we had a nationalist rally that took place this past weekend. A lot of controversy with that. It was basically I did 2 cartoons on this event already, so I'm going to stay away from that one. It went very well though, because there was no support for these for the hate group, and the Pike Countyans and local folks turned out to support diversity and to stay away from hate groups, which was wonderful. We also have then, of course, sports, which we're getting into local stories again. A 100-year-old birthday took place for a Kemper man. This deals with solid waste. Now this one might actually be a good idea for a cartoon. I'll look for these specific things associated with local politics and things of that nature. Sports again. Also we have entertainment. This is U-Pike Phi Beta Lambda students. Spring conference. Stay away from that. Mountain Arts Center. It's a great organization. You may hear my cat in the background. I apologize for that. Hillbilly Days took place. I've already did something based around Hillbilly Days, and then we go back to the beginning. So after these future stories run through, this is what I have to decide from. Now, also I can sort of come up with something on my own, which I already kind of have in mind what I want to do. It's really hot. The weather's been really hot. We only have one more small cool spell coming up, which is this weekend for Blackberry Winter. But I start out using this giant graphite, looks like kind of like a crayon, and this makes really broad lines. You can see here that it's more of a graphite top based pencil. Then I use a smaller graphite based pencil. This is a 6B, and it's really dark. We went over the different pencil grades before. So I start out with this, and I have a design in mind. Okay, I always play off the hillbilly thing because a lot of people have a lot of stereotypes about hillbillies in their region, and I usually like to use that in some way. This is a kneaded eraser to pick up the graphite where I don't want it. You can almost draw with this even if you have a lot of dark down, so you may go over it like this. So I have in mind something to do with summer, so I think that's what I'm going to focus on. Hillbilly theme / summer. I keep a book around too that really helps me with design. This book has a lot of just really interesting stuff in it, so I keep this to remember to keep my designs light. This is just something else I've been working on lately. So I have in mind something that I want to do. My idea consists of a hillbilly who's going to have his head inside of a freezer to the refrigerator, and maybe his wife will be saying something in the background along the lines of, you know, I know you miss winter, but this is ridiculous, something like that. I don't know. I'm still working with that. But this is kind of my idea. I'll play around with this and see. So I'll just sketch out with using this broad pen, just basic shapes, right? I'm not even trying to focus on drawing a refrigerator perfect. This is all just a rough draft. I always stress that. Students want to try to do something polished and finished from the very beginning, and that's not what we want. Now I think about the design of this. What would the kitchen layout? Refrigerators are in kitchens, so that's what we're going to have to do. This is a little local hillbilly character that I use. His name's Bill. He's found in a lot of different comics that I do. Looks different in each one. The version that I use usually for the newspaper, he's not as comical as, say, for the Hillbilly Bigfoot Survival Guide, which is something I put out too. So we have a refrigerator here. On the opposite side of the fridge, we may put a countertop. You know, put some little cabinet doors in here somewhere. Notice how I'm maybe even coloring this completely dark in order to see where that stops and begins. Notice my perspective line goes this way. I sometimes use tools for perspective lines, but you know, for this I'm just going to sketch out what I can come up with. I have a refrigerator, I have some countertops. Maybe over here we have maybe a window, the start of a window for the sink. Over here, this is where the countertop will extend. We don't see a stove. Let's just pretend that the stove's on the opposite side of the kitchen. That'll be okay. Or maybe we'll place the stove right here, maybe here. I'm thinking the start of the stove. Yeah, let's do that. We'll put the stove in here. So it goes back like this to the back, which you have the splash here for your sink going down. Now this is a hillbilly character, right? So if you think about a hillbilly character, you think, well, they usually
They live in like a log cabin, so there's going to be all these perspective lines coming down, making up the wood to the log cabin. I've actually drawn this character before in a comic a few times for the newspaper, and each time that I do, I have to remember, well, what did the barn look like? What did the horse look like? What did the interior of the house look like? Because I don't want to change it up. I want to keep continuity. That means the same, right, for all across your design of your worlds and characters. So that's kind of the outline of a kitchen. You could see this is the stove. You may see the stove door here. You could color that in some. Notice I'm just barely sketching this out. The cabinet drawers on the top. Notice this is an odd one over here, so I'll probably get rid of that. I've placed 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. I may end up only putting maybe 3 lines instead of 4. That way we have even number of cabinet drawers going across, or doors. Alright, so we have this at the top here. This is, like we said, the countertop over here. This is the sink, so the sink will be placed underneath the window right there. So there's the window with a curtain, and we have kind of the shape of a kitchen. I mean, it's not exactly looks, you know, could be polished up, and that's what we'll do later on. So now we start adding in the fine detail with this 6B. So I may have I draw circles a lot, right? So I start using my kneaded eraser, and I start pulling out where the character is going to be standing. We'll have the wife standing over here. She's pretty upset with him. We could have him standing over here by the refrigerator. We could have even like some water coming down where the ice in the freezer is melting from his head being in it. So now I have this area and this area that's been erased, so I'll start to sketch out the character using circles. I do this all the time. I always teach this. I use these circles to sketch out the design of whatever it is I'm going to do. She'll have her arms on her hips. She's mad. You can see this kind of coming together. Looks like a stick figure almost. That's the way I always try to start out with the characters, just to get a feel of where they are in all this. Over here, of course, the door comes out to the refrigerator like that. Here's the refrigerator door. So he will have his head in it, and so maybe his hand comes down and up holding onto the door, and then his body will come down like this. We won't see his head. His head will be inside this freezer, right? And his legs will come down, and he'll be standing something like that. So you can kind of get a feel of what this design is. Of course, her speech bubble will be coming up like this, and she'll be telling him something along the lines of, "I know you miss winter, but this is ridiculous." Okay, and outside, of course, we could have green and the mountains, and this will be blue. So I have my design now sort of drawn out. It's real rough. I would never send just this in. I'm going to work on this a little bit more, and that's what we're going to jump to next, is the next station with this in mind. Imagine what you're looking at. You may think I'm pointing this up at the ceiling, but I'm actually not. This is actually a Lightbox. It's constructed by a man named Tommy Mead from tools used that you can find at Lowe's. Typically Lightboxes are pretty expensive, so this was made at home. Now this is the design that we just worked on. Okay, it looks very, very light. Once we place it on top of here, you can see how the lines seem to fade out. I usually put a piece of tape just to keep it sturdy. Then I'll place another piece of paper on top. Now this is where it really gets good. Once you place this piece of paper on top, you see all the lines coming through. This is a blank piece of paper, placing it on top of my sketches that I did with the graphite pencils. Okay, so I'll take this down. Now what I'm going to be using is actually a blue markup pencil and a red markup pencil, and so I keep a sharpener close by always. My choice of eraser is again going to be the kneaded eraser for this portion. So then what I'll do is I'll start out in red, and I will actually trace over my lines, okay, that I want to keep. This process is very helpful. It keeps you from having to erase. You can refine certain things, straighten it up, and it also helps you to see what you want to leave out, to include, all that sorts of stuff. So I'm going to just basically trace over my own work now. If you don't have a Lightbox, I didn't for a very long time, and had to make one actually to have one. But if you don't have one, what I suggest doing is actually trying to place your your sketches on top of a windowsill, and that will help you a great deal in tracing. So you tape it up to the windowsill, put your drawing on top of that, and then trace it out. Don't get your parents angry with you for putting tape all over the window, but I'm sure they'll understand if you use just a little bit, and then after you're finished, clean up after yourself, right? So we'll speed through this portion of sketching this out so that you can see how it all comes together. We'll stop at the end so you can see it pulled off of this, okay? So let's get started here. Well, here's our version now. I want to show you this in red. Hopefully you can see it fairly clearly. The design just keeps being refined until you have basically what you're looking for. Let's try this. I'll move it up some and we'll try to zoom or fix the lens. There we go. You can see. So just those rough graphite sketches is turned into this design, which is about where I want it. But then refining it even more. Remember, we started out, started out with this, right? It was just that rough general sketch using graphite, and that's it. And then what happens is, once you keep refining, you eventually get to a point where you have about what you're looking for, which it turns into this here. Hopefully you can make that out well. So this has to be inked now. After it's inked, it has to be colored. I color it digitally, okay? So I'll go through the inking process with you, and I'll go ahead and color it later because I want this to be, we'll do a reveal on it later on so you can see it. But as of right now though, this is where we stand. We're at the inking process. This is the inking board table. Again, Tommy Mead built this. It's amazing. I use painter's tape. I create a ledge so it doesn't fall. Sometimes I'll use my three-way ruler here, or four-way ruler, to keep it up there, prop up the art and whatever I need to do. So now we're going to ink it. After we ink it, that's going to be the end of the video for today, but you could check out the colored version next weekend's Appalachian News Express, which would fall on around May the 7th, or 6th or 7th, I'm pretty sure. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started now on the inking process. I'm going to return back to the light table for this, but I wanted to use this table to show you exactly what we have. Sometimes I'm able to ink on top of the artwork here, but the pencil I used was a very light H pencil to do the final work. That's going to have to be on the light board to be able to see it. Okay, so let's get started. Alright then, so our final pencil, it's H pencil lead version of our drawings, placed down, a white piece of just regular sketch papers on top of it. I'm using a graphic pigment number 2 pen for the dark areas, for the dark lines, dark shapes and areas. I'm using a Pentel Stylo pen for some of the line work. I'm using a Rapidograph number 6 for the thick lines around the main characters. using a small Kuretake refillable pen for line work, and then also a Kuretake brush pen for some of the more fluid lines around the caption, the voice bubble, and things like that. So let's go ahead and get started inking. I'm going to have to speed through this. I apologize, but for the purpose of the video, our main focus is just the creation of the comic. Coloring, rendering it digitally will come later, and then you'll have to see again the newspaper or watch for my post the following weekend to see the final version. So here we have our design that will be used, and the caption and the color will come later. As you can see, the process works pretty good. Not a lot of erasing. You can keep refining things until you get it to about where you want it. So you could try this at home using even a window. Put the artwork that you sketch out on top of the window, and then you could trace over top of it using sketch paper. So it's a great technique. I hope you can use it. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'd like to see some of your work. So if you do produce some, please do email me, EplingIllustrations@gmail.com. I'd love to see it. Tell me about your process. How does it work? I'd love to learn more about that. Please subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and tune in for more stuff similar to this in the future. Hopefully we could put out some different stuff, not just tutorials, but process as well. Okay? Again, big thanks to Bruce Parsons, Kelly Thompson, and KVEC, and all those out there who support and encourage this type of work for our students. Okay, thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, I'm Christopher Epling, and keep drawing.